More than $890 million a day. That is how much the war against Iran is costing American taxpayers. That big number comes from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Now, the Department of Defense is not releasing a whole lot of details or specifics about what it is spending. So what these analysts did was take the actions they know that are going on and compare them to normal congressional estimates. That's how they came up with these numbers. So what do we have? Operations are clocking in at $30 million a day for the air portion of all of this. Naval maneuvers at $15 million a day. Ground operations at $1.6 million. All those explosions, the bombs, missiles, artillery, about $1.5 billion in just the first 100 hours. And those interceptor units to stop Iranian missiles and drones, $1.7 billion in that time. Now, these analysts say it's fully possible those costs will start dropping now, since the start of such a conflict is usually the most expensive time. But we still don't know how long this is going to go on, and if ultimately the Trump administration decides to put boots on the ground, well, the Penn-Wharton budget model suggests if that were to happen and this went on for 2 months, the cost could be as high as $95 billion.
In 2024, the United States government approved a defense budget of $886 billion, nearly $900 billion dedicated to military spending in a single year. To understand just how massive that number is, you have to step back and compare it to the rest of the world. The United States now spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined: China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Japan. All of them together still spend less than Washington does on war and defense. But what makes this number even more remarkable isn't just its size, it's how quietly it passes through Congress every year. Little debate, little outrage, and almost no serious public questioning. Because behind that $886 billion budget is a powerful system of money, influence, and incentives that has been quietly shaping global conflict for decades.
This is Dwight Eisenhower. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. In other words, the military industrial complex was taking away resources that we needed and the world needed. It wasn't just the United States, the world needed to avoid the starvation and hunger and I mean all of the worst miseries of mankind.
To understand how this system works, you have to go back to the end of World War II. In 1945, the United States emerged as the most powerful military force on Earth, but instead of shrinking its war machine after victory, America did something unprecedented. It built a permanent one. During the Cold War, the United States created a massive global defense infrastructure designed to counter the Soviet Union. Military bases spread across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Nuclear arsenals expanded, weapons research accelerated, defense contractors became deeply embedded in the American economy. What began as a temporary wartime effort slowly transformed into a permanent system, one where war readiness, weapons production, and military expansion became a constant feature of American life. And once that system was built, the military economy goes far beyond the Pentagon itself. Behind every fighter jet, missile system, aircraft carrier, and drone is an enormous network of private companies that manufacture the tools of modern warfare. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Boeing receive tens of billions of dollars every year in government contracts. In fact, the defense industry has become one of the most powerful corporate sectors in the United States. These companies design the weapons, build the weapons, maintain the weapons, and often lobby Congress to continue funding the programs that keep those weapons flowing. And that's where the real money begins to move. In 2023 alone, Lockheed Martin received over $45 billion in government contracts, making it the single largest defense contractor in the world. Raytheon followed close behind, securing billions in missile defense systems and radar technology. Northrop Grumman produces advanced stealth bombers and surveillance systems. Boeing builds military aircraft, helicopters, and weapons platforms. These companies are not just contractors, they are central players in the global military economy. And their financial success depends heavily on one thing: continued defense spending. Every year, Congress votes on the defense budget through legislation known as the National Defense Authorization Act. or NDAA. This bill determines how much money the Pentagon receives and how that money is spent. On paper, the process looks like a careful evaluation of national security needs. Lawmakers debate threats, analyze military capabilities, and decide what resources the country needs to defend itself. But in practice, the process often works very differently. Defense contractors spend tens of millions of dollars every year on lobbying in Washington. Their goal is simple: ensure that military spending remains high and that major weapons programs continue receiving funding. These companies also spread their operations across dozens of congressional districts. Factories, research centers, and production facilities are deliberately located in key political regions so that members of Congress have a direct economic interest in maintaining defense spending. When lawmakers vote on the Pentagon budget, they are not just deciding on military strategy, they are also deciding whether jobs in their districts will continue to exist. This creates a powerful incentive structure where reducing military spending becomes politically risky. Cutting a weapons program doesn't just affect defense strategy, it can also mean layoffs, factory closures, and economic disruption back home. And so the budget keeps growing. Since the early 2000s, the United States has spent trillions of dollars on wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some estimates place the total cost of those conflicts at over $6 trillion when long-term care for veterans and interest on war debt are included. But even as those wars began to wind down, the defense budget did not shrink. Instead, new threats emerged: China's military expansion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Iran's missile programs, North Korea's nuclear weapons. Each new geopolitical challenge becomes another reason to maintain or increase military spending. But behind these threats lies a deeper reality. The modern defense budget is not just about preparing for war, it is about sustaining an entire economic ecosystem built around national security. Weapons research, cybersecurity programs, intelligence operations, military bases, logistics networks, and global deployments all feed into a massive system that employs millions of people and generates enormous profits for corporations tied to the defense industry. This system has become so deeply embedded in the American economy that dismantling it would be extraordinarily difficult. Even former President Dwight Eisenhower warned about this system more than 60 years ago. In his famous 1961 farewell address, Eisenhower, a five-star general who commanded Allied forces during World War II, issued a stark warning to the American public. He cautioned against what he called the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower feared that the growing alliance between defense contractors, the military establishment, and political institutions could create a dangerous cycle where military spending expanded not just for security reasons, but because powerful economic interests depended on it. His warning was largely ignored. Over time, the military-industrial complex became one of the most influential forces in American politics. Defense contractors fund political campaigns. Retired military officials often take executive roles at defense companies. Government regulators move into private sector jobs connected to the same industries they once oversaw. This revolving door creates a powerful network where military policy, corporate profit, and political influence are closely intertwined. And this brings us back to the $886 billion war budget. To many Americans, the number sounds abstract, just another line in a government spending bill. But that budget funds a vast network of global power. The United States maintains hundreds of military bases across more than 70 countries. It operates fleets of aircraft carriers that patrol the world's oceans. It deploys advanced surveillance systems in space and cyberspace. It funds nuclear weapons modernization programs that will cost hundreds of billions of dollars over the next several decades. Maintaining this level of global dominance requires enormous resources, and once the system is built, reducing it becomes almost impossible without fundamentally reshaping America's role in the world. But there is another question that rarely gets asked. Who benefits from this system? Defense contractors generate enormous profits from government contracts. Political leaders gain influence by supporting military strength. Entire local economies depend on military bases and defense factories. Even global alliances are tied to American defense spending, as allies rely on U.S. security guarantees backed by military power. The incentives all point in the same direction: more spending, more weapons, more expansion. And that is why the $886 billion war budget continues to pass with little resistance, because behind that number is not just a national security strategy. It is a deeply entrenched system of money and power that shapes how the United States operates on the global stage. The result is a defense budget that grows almost automatically. Even during periods of relative peace, military spending remains historically high. Programs that cost billions of dollars continue receiving funding year after year, and political leaders from both major parties often support these budgets with overwhelming bipartisan votes, because challenging the system carries enormous political risk. The truth is that the United States has built something unprecedented in modern history: a permanent global military infrastructure supported by a massive economic engine. That engine generates jobs, profits, and political influence across the country. And once such a system exists, dismantling it becomes extraordinarily difficult, which brings us to the deeper lesson behind the $886 billion war budget. The budget itself is not just about defense. It is about power, the power to project military force anywhere in the world, the power to shape global alliances and geopolitical outcomes, the power to maintain a system that ties together governments, corporations, and military institutions into a single network of influence. And like many systems built on power, it survives because questioning it is far harder than accepting it. Every year the number grows, every year the system expands, and every year the same question remains quietly unanswered. Is the $886 billion war budget truly about national security? Or is it about sustaining one of the most powerful economic and political systems ever created? Because when you follow the money, expose the power, and reveal the incentives behind the system, the story becomes much bigger than a single government budget. It becomes a story about how modern power actually works, and why some of the largest numbers in the world pass through Congress every year.